Hey Yogis, it's John Arnold here, and it's almost midnight. You can't see a clock sitting here next to me, and I was getting ready to go to bed, but I want to share a thought with you. I actually was going to do this at Facebook Live, but I couldn't get it to stream. So here you go. I decided to shoot a quick video and run something by you to consider and get some thoughts from you on. This is a conversation I had with Rena in one of the first 200 uh, training weekends when we were taking a walk around the park downtown Hot Springs. And she said it would make a good post. And I don't have the energy at this point to write it. So I'm just going to speak it stream of consciousness and see how it goes. Having me a little bit of lavender, lavender and chamomile tea here before I go to bed. So, anyways, here's what's rumbling around in my head. I was sharing with Rena that I have a good friend who is a rather renowned tracker, and he was studying coyotes. I'm gonna give you a little backstory here, so for this to make sense. I love to track animals. It's a big passion of mine. Nature is one of the places where I plug in and slow down, get really connected to God. And tracking's been my foremost love that's kind of driven me out there to look at the dirt a whole lot and knock around through the bushes. And every animal, I don't know if you realize this or not, but every animal has what they call a harmonic gait, which is kind of it's the natural flow that they would be in, that they would move in, provided they're not being pushed by some kind of circumstance. You know, it might be that they're hunting, they slow down, and we kind of think of that. John Young, my friend who I've learned most of my tracking from, he talks about this baseline gait as sort of a zero. And then when an animal steps into a gait higher than that, it's like a +1. And if it slows down, it's at like a -1. Okay. And these +1 movements usually happen when the animal is pushed to move or pulled to move by something. Or so, for example, a predator may be in their area, or they may feel compromised, or they may be trying to hurry to get across cover, but they speed up for some reason. And a one minus, a -1, they're slowing down, usually to gather information or to be stealthy. But where they want to be is right here, because zero is kind of the perfect blend of energy conservation and awareness. All right. Energy conservation awareness. So it's like the perfect balance. If you move up, you start losing awareness and you start burning a lot of energy. If you move down, you have more awareness and you're using less energy. This is a nice compromise between the two, and it's where most animals walk. Well, my friend John Young, who was studying coyotes and he was tracking them, he noticed a phenomenon. And that was that a coyote, if a predator came into its region, that within, I think it was a week or 10 days, it was a fairly small amount of time, may have been as much as a couple weeks, but I don't think it was more than that. If the predator stayed in that coyote's region, one of two things would happen to the coyote. It would either move up into it would immediately go into this 1+, and it would stay in that 1+ while the predator is there. So one of two things would happen. It would either need to leave that context, all right, so that it could get back down to this harmonic gait, or it would fall prey to whatever the predator was because its awareness was compromised and it was burning too much energy. And I thought, wow, there's some heavy life lesson in that, because we know from some research that's been done that a person's harmonic gait should be a stroll. That we should be, if we're in a relaxed and kind of parasympathetic state, we would just be strolling. And almost nobody strolls unless they are on vacation. In fact, they found that the average person in one study needs to be on vacation for up to 2 weeks before they slow down to a stroll, and that the average person is moving above their harmonic gait. Now, I want you to stop and think about that. I assume, that's assumption, but I assume, and I think I'm not going out on much of a limb, that if we're living above our harmonic gait and we're, pounding the pavement as we move from task to task to task in life, then we are consuming too much energy and it is unsustainable. And we've either got to do something about that context or we're going to fall prey to something. And I know that's true in my life. So I kind of lift that out there for you to consider. And I have a couple questions for you. One would be, what are the telltale signs for you that you are getting up into this zone? All right. What are the telltale signs for you? I know that when I was going through a very deep depression at one point, I created what I called my red flag list. And on my red flag list were indicators to me that I was getting out of balance and I needed to be concerned that I was not here. I wasn't necessarily in this, well, I guess in some ways I was in a one plus state, even though I was very slowed down physically. I was definitely in I think we go into a sympathetic state here, and that becomes toxic over time if we stay in it too long. It's damaging to our bodies. Um, when I was depressed, I had this red flag list, and it was things like, for example, if I started to see uh, fast food bags piling up on the floorboard in my car, that meant a couple things. One, it usually meant that I was so depressed that I had stopped paying attention to eating. And I could go sometimes almost all day without eating, and I'd start to get a headache and realize, oh, I haven't eaten anything. And then because I was depressed and didn't have energy, I wouldn't want to make something, and I would go for whatever was convenient, whether it was healthy or not. And I was not maintaining cleanliness and order around me. So, bam, I would see these bags piling up on the floor in my car, uh, and didn't care because I didn't have the energy to care. So that was a big red flag for me. Or having bills that were going unpaid, even though I had all the money to pay them, just because I was neglecting common chores, common tasks, because my life was very, very out of balance. Sleep, not being able to sleep was a huge one for me. Isolating and not, like dodging things that I normally would like to do. So, for example, at that time, Susan, my wife, asked me there was if I why I hadn't gone and tried to track an animal that was suspected to be in Hot Springs. Those of you who are in Hot Springs will remember this a number of years ago. It's probably 12 or 15 years ago. That's a long time. They thought there was a big cat near a neighborhood area, which is the sort of thing I would have been thrilled to go try to find. And Susan wondered, why in the world didn't I do that? And at the same time, there was also another guy that we had met, had a lot of common interests. And she said, I don't understand why you don't call him and you guys don't do something together. And all I could do is look at her and say, you know what? When I have time to do something, I don't want to do anything. And those were all red flags for me. Those were things that showed me that I was out of balance, that I was definitely not in a harmonic gait. Now, that was depression. That was one extreme. But I think, too, we can get up into this zone just by living at a constant rush, that we are living in a go, 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 go mode. And that doesn't work because everything in nature, everything God's created, we look around us and has natural cycles of rest and work, rest and work, rest and work. And we've created this 24/7 culture and we go, 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 go. And then we wonder why we're sick, 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 sick. So here's what a couple things that I would ask you to consider and think about in terms of your own awareness so that you can hopefully, if you're living up in this, recognize it and pull it back down. One is, what are your red flags? I've raised that question. How do you recognize when you're running at too fast a pace? It might be simple things like, for example, I know when I got away from meditation or when I get away from meditation, it's easy for me to overcommit. because I'm not grounded in my true self and where I ought to be and what I ought to be doing based off of who God designed me to be. And instead, when I get off kilter and I'm ungrounded, I start saying yes just out of expectation to meet expectations of people and not, fail to please people and things like that. So, it might be something like overcommitment. It might be like workaholism or perfectionism for you. Uh, what does it look like when you get in that 1+ state? How can you recognize that? And you might want to take a piece of paper and write down 5 or 6 or 8 things that are your red flags that you're getting in that zone. The other thing is what starts to consume you? How do you then begin to fall prey to things? Does social media consume you? Hours of watching TV, does it consume you? Does being a consumer consume you? By that I mean you go out and you start buying things impulsively. What begins to consume you when you're no longer living internally and externally in a stroll? And then last but not least, I think when I was going to put this on Facebook, I was going to call it something like uh, awareness and sustainability lessons from tracking and God. And here's the God part in that, okay? And I'll throw a yoga piece in here. Well, yoga's all over that already, but the God piece is this. In our culture, we have completely divorced ourselves basically from Sabbath. And I'm fully convinced and believe that God was aware of this trap that we could fall into, and he commanded Sabbath as a way on a cyclical basis to bring us back down to a harmonic gait. That Sabbath, keeping a day for rest, a day that you make holy, is one way that God has equipped us with the tool we need to make sure that we are in a parasympathetic state and that we are grounded in Him and we're aware so we don't fall prey to things because our awareness is compromised, but we're in a very aware state. And we're also not overexpending ourselves energetically to where we become so depleted that we become sick, we become ill, we make grievous mistakes, 100 other ills that happen when we are fatigued. So Sabbath is one thing. And then for me, my daily practice of yoga, I do 30 minutes every day at least, and my daily 30-minute practice of yoga is kind of a daily reset that if it doesn't take me all the way down, all the way from here to here, it at least nudges me back toward my harmonic gait and brings me back internally and externally to a stroll. So I would love to hear in the comments your thoughts on this, maybe some of your red flags, because I bet we share some and we might be blind to our own red flags. Sometimes we're so close to it, we can't see it. Like my wife asking me why I wasn't doing those things. I didn't even see that I wasn't doing those things. So what are some of your red flags? What consumes you? And then I guess lastly, what are the core routines you need in your life to make sure that you are constantly pulling this back to a harmonic gait, that you spend as much time as possible in this harmonic gait of your life. Now, I'm not trying to make it sound like these things are evil, all right? There are times and there are seasons when we are called to be at a 1+ or at a 1-, okay? These serve critical functions. If an animal stayed in a stroll all the time, it would also die, okay? But the key here is our awareness at a place that we are intentionally in this space or this space, or are we simply reactively falling into that place, like we are drifting into that place, not consciously, not intentionally, so that it serves our best interests, serves the people around us our best interests, serves God best, but rather instead, it's just what we're drifting into, and it becomes life depleting, damaging us, and damaging other people around us. So that's my thought for this evening. And I really wish I could have done this as a Facebook Live. But seeing as how it's midnight, which is one sign that I'm up here a little bit more than I need to be, you know, seeing as how it's midnight, I probably wouldn't have had anybody on the Facebook Live anyways. But that doesn't mean you can't comment below after the fact. And I will gladly respond to those comments. Thank you for listening. And I look forward to hearing from you below. Now, bye now and have a blessed day.